One tiny habit you repeat every day can turn into a $1,000 repair. 10 of them together can quietly burn through more than the value of your car. Most drivers have no idea their idling, topping up, and shortcut fixes are slowly killing pumps, sensors, and engines. Today, break down 10 bad habits that cost thousands before you notice. Let's dive in. Let's start with a tiny quick fix that quietly destroys engines every year. Number 10. Topping up with tap water. This one destroys cooling systems so slowly that most drivers never connect the habit to the four-figure repairs that show up years later. Topping up your reservoir with tap water feels harmless, but trust me, it is one of the most expensive quick fixes you can make. I have seen perfect engines overheat, lose heater function, and blow head gaskets because the coolant chemistry was ruined one cup at a time. Tap water looks clean, but inside your engine, it becomes a mineral bomb. Every heat cycle bakes calcium and magnesium onto the tiny tubes in your radiator and heater core. That scale works like plaque in an artery. The coolant still moves, but it moves slow, and the engine starts running hotter in summer traffic or long uphill climbs. You feel it as a creeping temperature gauge or weak cabin heat on cold mornings. Then corrosion starts. The minerals boost conductivity and eat into aluminum surfaces. Thin heater core tubes corrode first, leaving your windshield fogging and the cabin filled with a sweet coolant smell. Radiators follow. I have pulled cores so clogged with rust and scale that barely any coolant could pass through. By then, the car is already on borrowed time. Mixing random coolants makes it worse. Some combinations gel into a sludge that attacks water pump seals and thermostat housings. That is when sudden overheating hits. The engine starts knocking from hot spots, and the repair bill jumps into the thousands. The fix is simple. Always use premixed coolant or the correct concentrate with distilled water. If you have added tap water over the years, a full flush and proper refill can save the system before the damage becomes permanent. Trust me, it is far cheaper than a heater core or head gasket job. And just when you think small choices don't matter, the next habit proves they really, really do. Number 9. Living on fumes daily. This one looks harmless until the bills start stacking up. Driving with the fuel light on day after day quietly cooks your fuel pump, starves your engine, and in the worst cases, melts a catalytic converter that costs more than some used cars. I have seen drivers swear their car just suddenly died, when the truth was a year of low fuel habits slowly killing everything inside the tank. Your fuel pump lives inside a bath of gasoline. That fuel cools it and lubricates it. When you run the tank near empty, the pump loses that cooling bath and starts running hotter. On long drives or scorching days, the pump bakes itself from the inside. The first sign is a faint whine from under the rear seat, then hard starts, then sudden stalling when you need power the most. Low fuel also stirs up the junk at the bottom of the tank. Every tank has a little rust, dirt, and sediment from years of fill-ups. When the level gets low, that gunk rushes straight into the pump strainer and fuel filter. Flow drops. The pump works harder, and fine debris squeezes through to the injectors. That is when you feel hesitation, weak acceleration, and misfires under load. Here is where things get ugly. When the pump sucks air on a hill or sharp turn, the engine starves and misfires. Raw fuel hits the converter on restart and overheats it. One burned converter is a $1,000 mistake. The fix is simple. Keep the gauge above a quarter tank. Your pump stays cool, your injectors stay clean, and your engine runs steady for years without surprise bills. Now, for a habit that turns your safety systems into guessing machines. Number 8. Driving with blind sensors. This one is more dangerous than drivers ever realize. When your steering angle sensor, or ADAS camera, is even slightly out of calibration, your car thinks it is pointing one way, while the tires and the road are saying something completely different. That tiny disagreement comes back during emergency maneuvers, and trust me, it shows up at the worst possible time. Look, modern cars rely on digital eyesight. Your stability control, lane keeping, adaptive cruise, and even basic ABS all depend on sensors that must know the car's true center line. The moment you get an alignment, change a suspension arm, replace a windshield, or repair a bumper, those angles shift a little. Without recalibration, the software still believes the old measurements, and that is when the car starts making strange choices. I have seen drivers complain that their lane assist tugs the wheel the wrong way on a straight road. Others get phantom braking on the highway because a misaligned radar sees a ghost obstacle. Some come in with warnings for traction control or ABS right after suspension work, thinking something is broken, when the real problem is a sensor that lost its 0 point. Here is where things get ugly. During a real emergency, stability control uses your steering input to decide which wheel to brake. If the sensor is wrong, the car may react late or in the wrong direction. That tiny delay is the difference between a clean recovery and a curb strike or worse. The fix is simple. Anytime you change alignment, height, glass, or anything around those sensors, recalibrate them. It is the software version of an alignment. Your car steers cleaner, the warnings disappear, and every safety feature reacts exactly when you need it. Now for the one most drivers get wrong even when they think they're saving money. Number 7. Replacing only one axle. This one catches more drivers than you think. Swapping only 1 or 2 tires feels harmless, but it quietly throws your car's balance off and forces the drivetrain to fight itself every mile. I have seen perfectly healthy AWD systems burn up clutches and bearings because one axle had taller tires than the other. Here's the thing. A brand new tire is physically bigger than a worn one. Even a few millimeters of extra tread means that wheel travels farther with every rotation. Your ABS and traction control read that difference as slip, and your AWD system tries to correct it non-stop. That constant internal slipping builds heat until a transfer case or center differential finally gives up, leaving you with a 4-figure repair you never saw coming. It gets even scarier in the rain. Most people stick the freshest tires on the front because it feels safer. The reality is the opposite. Your rear tires are the bodyguards that keep the car from spinning. When the back has the worst tread, it hydroplanes first, and the rear can snap out so fast you barely have time to react. I have watched drivers swear their traction control failed when the real problem was mismatched grip front to rear. The fix is simple. Keep the best rubber on the rear of any car, and on AWD, replace all 4 or follow the manufacturer's tread depth limits. Your handling stays predictable, your safety systems behave properly, and your drivetrain survives for years instead of months. Number 6. Idling away engine health. This one feels relaxing from the driver's seat, but inside the engine, it is quietly wrecking things you cannot see. Long remote start warm-ups and 15-minute idling sessions fill your oil with raw fuel, load the cylinders with soot, and leave the engine half awake and drowning in contaminants. I have seen engines with barely any miles act worn out, simply because they spent their lives warming up in park. Look, your engine warms properly when it is moving. Oil needs real flow and real heat to stabilize. When the car sits idling, everything stays cold for far too long. Fuel hits the cylinder walls, thins the oil, and slides straight into the crankcase. The oil never gets hot enough to burn it off, especially in winter. That is when you start noticing a fuel smell on the dipstick or an oil level that goes up instead of down. Direct injection engines take an even bigger hit. Cool combustion and low pressure leave soot on pistons, injectors, and plugs. Idle-heavy cars develop rough idle, hesitation, and black exhaust tips long before their mileage suggests anything is wrong. Diesels suffer the worst. They wet stack at idle, coating the turbo and DPF with unburned fuel and soot until regenerations become constant and warning lights start popping up. The fix is simple. Start the engine, let it stabilize for a minute, and drive gently. You warm the oil faster, burn off contaminants, protect the turbo and DPF, and keep the engine clean for years instead of seasons. Let's move to a mistake so common it's become a weekly shop complaint. Number 5. Installing cheap LED bulbs. This one looks like the easiest upgrade in the world, But trust me, it's one of the quickest ways to turn a $60 lighting mod into a $1,000 electrical nightmare. Those bargain LED or HID plug-and-play kits you see online rarely match the way your headlight was designed to work. And when the optics, heat, and wiring are all pushed out of spec, things get ugly fast. Look, a halogen housing is built around a tiny filament sitting in the perfect spot. A cheap LED shoves a flat chip in a different position, blasting light everywhere except where you need it. That's why you get a bright white wall of foreground and almost no down-road visibility. It blinds oncoming traffic, and they flash you constantly, but you still can't see far ahead. The heat is what really bites people. Low-quality LEDs run hot at the base, and their little fans or heat sinks barely keep up. I've pulled housings where the bulb socket literally melted into the reflector. Some kits throw in big resistors to fix warning lights, and those resistors get scorching, hot enough to cook wiring behind the dust cap. One driver came in complaining of flickering headlights and a burning plastic smell. His bargain LEDs had baked the connector until it crumbled in my hands. The fix wasn't a new bulb. It was a new harness and a new lighting control module. The smart move is simple. If you want real LED performance, use a proper retrofit or stick to quality, vehicle-specific kits that won't fry your wiring or warp your housings. Cheap headlights save money today and send you straight to the electronics bay tomorrow. Now let's talk about a tiny motion that can ruin a $1,000 rack. Number 4. Holding full lock while parking. This one sounds harmless until you hear the noise your steering makes right before it dies. Holding the wheel slammed all the way to the stop is basically pinning your entire steering system at its breaking point. I've seen perfect pumps start whining, racks start leaking, and EPS motors overheat just because a driver kept cranking the wheel that extra half inch while squeezing into a parking spot. Here's the thing, when you hit full lock, the rack is already at its physical limit, but your hands keep pushing. On hydraulic systems, that traps fluid at maximum pressure and forces the pump to fight against a dead end. The fluid overheats, the seals cook, and the pump wears faster than you'd ever expect. That faint groan you hear at low speed? That's the pump begging for mercy. Electric steering isn't immune either. The motor has to counter every bit of force you're putting into the wheel. Hold it there long enough, and the motor draws heavy current, heats up, and grinds against the end stop. Do that for years, and you're looking at a rack or EPS unit that costs more than a full set of tires. I had a driver come in complaining about a notchy steering feel and a rumbling sensation during tight turns. The rack's end seals were worn out from years of pinning the wheel at full lock in every parking maneuver. The repair bill climbed into 4 digits before lunch. The fix is easy. When you feel the wheel hit the stop, back off a couple degrees. You won't lose turning radius, but you will save the pump, hoses, rack, and tie rods from constant abuse. Your steering stays quiet, smooth, and alive for the long haul. Now for a move that looks clean on camera, but filthy on your repair bill. Number 3. Pressure washing the engine bay. This one ruins cars quietly. You blast the engine bay with a pressure washer for a clean Instagram shot, and a week later, your car starts misfiring, stalling, or throwing random warning lights. Trust me, nothing destroys modern electronics faster than water being forced into places it was never designed to go. Here's the thing, those coil packs sitting on top of your spark plugs, they're weather resistant, not waterproof. A high-pressure jet shoves water past the rubber boots and straight into the plug wells. The engine starts running rough, the idle shakes, and the check engine light begins flashing. If the moisture lingers, corrosion forms, and that temporary misfire becomes permanent coil damage. But the real trouble shows up later. Modern cars hide ECUs, relays, and big connectors all around the bay. They're sealed for rain, not pressure washers. Once water gets inside a connector, it stays there, trapped behind plastic like moisture under wallpaper. Weeks later, the car starts throwing random ABS codes, steering faults, or no start conditions, and nobody connects it to the wash you did last month. I've seen people replace sensors, alternators, even full wiring sections, before discovering one corroded plug full of green crust. One driver came in with intermittent stalling and a burning plastic smell. The decoder resistors from a cheap headlight kit had overheated after getting soaked during a wash. It cooked the wiring loom until the insulation crumbled. That repair crossed into four-figure territory fast. If you want a clean bay, do it the safe way. Low-pressure water, gentle degreaser, and avoid spraying directly at coils, connectors, and modules. A shiny engine isn't worth months of electrical ghosts, or the bill to chase them. Now for the habit that brings cars into the shop with dead batteries every week. Number 2. Power draining your car with gadgets. This one fools even smart drivers because every device looks tiny and harmless on its own. A dash cam here, a GPS there, a phone charger that's always plugged in, an OBD tracker you forgot about. None of them seem like a threat, but stack them together, leave them running overnight, and suddenly your car feels like it's aging 10 years in one winter. I've seen perfectly good batteries and alternators die early just because a handful of gadgets kept sipping power after the driver walked away. Here's the part most people never think about. Your car is supposed to sleep. When you lock it and walk inside, its modules wind down to a tiny draw, barely enough to light an LED, but every always-on accessory you add wakes the car up a little more or keeps a circuit alive when it should be resting. That tiny parasitic drain builds slowly, like a dozen tiny leaks in the same water tank. Give it a few days parked, especially in cold weather, and suddenly you're turning the key and hearing nothing but a sad click. And once that battery gets dragged low, everything downstream starts suffering. The alternator now has to play hero, running hotter and harder every time you drive as it tries to refill a battery that never actually gets full. Do that for months, and the alternator's bearings and diodes start wearing early. Then one random morning, your dash lights flicker like a disco, and your car barely crawls home. The electronics don't like low voltage either. When the battery dips during a crank, modules freak out, throwing ABS lights, airbag warnings, power steering faults, radio glitches, sometimes even corrupting memory. I've watched drivers chase ghosts for weeks after a simple low-voltage episode caused by a dash cam that wouldn't sleep. One owner came in after replacing 2 batteries in a year. The real culprit? A forgotten OBD dongle pulling power 24/7 and never letting the car rest. Look, gadgets are fine, but only when wired smart. Use ignition switched circuits, get a dash cam kit with low voltage cutoff, or add a dedicated battery pack. Your main battery survives, your alternator breathes easier, and your morning stops starting with jump leads. Save the biggest shock for last. This next habit destroys your AC without you noticing. Number 1. Choking your AC with recirc and a forgotten filter. This one sneaks up on people because nothing looks wrong. The AC still kind of blows, the button lights up, and the car smells only a little funky at first. But this combo, never changing the cabin filter and leaving recirculation on all the time, is one of the quietest ways to murder your AC system long before it's time. I've seen cars come in needing a 4-figure evaporator job simply because the owner never touched a $10 filter hiding behind the glove box. Here's where things get ugly. When that filter clogs with dust and leaves, the blower has to work twice as hard just to pull air into the system. You feel it as weak airflow even on max fan, but inside, the motor is cooking itself, drawing extra current, building heat, and wearing out its brushes faster than anyone expects. Some blowers start squeaking like a hamster wheel before they finally give up, but the real damage happens deeper inside. With airflow restricted, the evaporator gets too cold and starts freezing over. That sheet of ice blocks airflow even more, and drivers mistake it for low refrigerant when the real problem is a filter that hasn't been changed since the car was new. Once that ice melts, everything stays damp, and if recirculation has been on all week, the air inside the HVAC box just sits there, warm and humid, perfect mold factory. That musty gym bag smell blasting out of your vents? That's mold growing on the evaporator fins. And once it gets deep into the foam and the case, surface sprays barely touch it. I've seen dashboards pulled apart because the evaporator was so contaminated it had to be replaced. A job that turns a simple maintenance miss into a wallet killer. One owner told me their AC never felt strong again after summer. The cabin filter looked like a felt brick, and the evaporator was coated in slime from years of permanent recirc. The blower motor was whining, the windows kept fogging, and the entire system was suffocating. The fix is embarrassingly simple. Change the cabin filter regularly. Use recirc only when you need fast cooling, or you're stuck behind a smoky truck. And once in a while, let the system breathe fresh air so the evaporator can actually dry out. Your AC will stay colder, cleaner, and far cheaper to maintain. Now that you know the habits draining your wallet, don't make the mistakes that can get you fined too. Our next video exposes 17 illegal engine hacks drivers still try. Watch it now.